Welcome to the 2024 year ahead horoscope for Taurus, rising, and of course, sun sign. You can watch this for whatever planet or placement that you want to, but this is written specifically for the rising sign. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Taurus rising. The first thing I want to just cover real quick are the major transits of 2024. I did a whole video of a year ahead horoscope / year ahead overview, just in general, so everyone can get an idea of what all the major transits are. But the big transits that we have going on this year are Pluto is going to be ingressing into Aquarius. At the beginning of the year, we get Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. It will move back into Capricorn for a couple months. And then by November 19th, we have Pluto moving into Aquarius permanently. It will not retrograde back into Capricorn after this. So quite a big shift there. The next big transit that we have is Jupiter conjoining Uranus. This is, in my opinion, the best transit of the year. This is the most exciting one. For Taurus rising, we're going to see how exciting this is. I'm actually really curious of what this is going to look like. So let me know in the comments below if you watch this throughout the year and we get past April and we get into May. Let me know what ends up happening with you guys here, because I'm really curious how this is going to look for you guys. We get Jupiter ingressing into Gemini on May 25th. If you don't know already, Jupiter ingresses into a new zodiac sign once a year. So Jupiter will be going into your second house. That should be good, but that comes with some caveats we'll talk about. We get this Venus Cazimi Gemini. This whole June is a lot of Gemini stuff. So a lot of second house stuff for you guys. So a lot of like money stuff happening for you once we kick off the end of spring, beginning of summer. And then kind of the more bigger transit in the more meta perspective is going to be the Jupiter-Saturn square. And we're going to be getting two of them this year. The first one's going to be on August 19th, and the next one's not till the very end of the year on December 24th on Christmas Eve. This is a very long-term transit we'll talk a lot about as we go through. And then, of course, arguably the worst transit that we have this year is the Mars retrograde that will be in Leo and Cancer. However, in 2024, it will just be retrograding in Leo, and then by the time we begin 2025, it will retrograde back into Cancer, and it'll be there till like what I think May of 2025 is when it like leaves shadow and everything. So there's a lot to talk about there. So before we begin, I also want to remind you guys, if you want to know exactly what is going to be going on for you for this year ahead, and you want to keep up to date with all of the transits and how they're going to be affecting your planets, your placements, go ahead and check out my website. I offer a transit calendar for iCalendar, for your Google Calendar. It's one of my favorite things that I offer. In fact, I've got it on my phone. Pretty much you get a little ICS file that goes over to your phone, and over on your calendar, if you've got like a calendar app like most of your phones do, you get updated of when a transit is happening to you. Like today, when I'm recording this, Venus is conjoining my moon. It's a little bit hard to see on my phone, but it's that little orange line. And if you click it, it'll tell you the interpretation and what it means. But it's nice because you don't have to open an app and it's just right there. So it's only $20. Go ahead and check it out on my website. It's a way to support the channel as well. And also, if you really want to get a good detail of what the year ahead is going to be like specifically for you, consider booking a consultation with me. If you want to book a consultation, you can look over at my website. So let's go ahead and get back into it. So let's start talking about January. The first thing that we've got going on in January is going to be Mercury stationing direct. Now, I'm going to make some TikToks about this, but I really think 2024, the very beginning of 2024, is a really good time to like set year ahead New Year's resolutions. The reason being is Jupiter stations direct on like December 31st, and then Mercury stations direct on January 1st. And so by the beginning of the year, all of the planets are moving direct. And I think there's this nice, refreshing forward movement energy going on with the new year. Now, I kind of, oh, never mind. This is actually all correct. Because I'm like recording the first two zodiac signs, like the Aries risings and the Taurus risings have to get the kinks a little bit worked out. But Mercury stations direct in your 8th house in Sagittarius. This is, of course, ruling other people's money, death, and debt. So Mercury has been retrograde in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, and belief in Capricorn in December. And it went back into Sagittarius like just a week before New Year's. And so Mercury in your chart, let me go ahead and just pull up the chart real quick so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Mercury rules your second house of money, finances, and resources. Where are we at here? We want Taurus rising. There we go. Mercury rules your second house of money, finances, and resources, right? And it's been retrograde in your 8th house of other people's money. So there might have been like some debt that you were in, or you were trying to restructure things. Maybe you owed someone money. Maybe someone owed money to you. And this was all kind of getting worked out. And so this all gets kind of like worked out and settled by the time that we start the year. So I really like that. What's interesting about this to me is a lot of this year is focused on money with you guys. Now, there is a really positive part of that, but don't be like, oh, it's money, so it's going to be super great. There's a lot of complications with it that isn't overall bad. It's just there is a really big focus on money this year. So I'd really kind of pay attention to this Mercury retrograde and what was going on with your money, because that's going to be important as we go on throughout the year. Then on January 4th, just a few days after that, we get Mars ingressing into Capricorn. I think the Mars ingresses this year are really important. Mars has a really interesting story, a lot of interesting transits this year. And Mars is exalted in Capricorn. We like Mars in Capricorn. Mars does really, really well in Capricorn. Mars is about fights, conflicts, inflammation, separation, cutting, but it's exalted in Capricorn. Think of Mars is like, a worker, and Capricorn is like a system. It's a schedule. It's a routine. And Mars just does really, really well there. But Mars is going into your 9th house of spirituality, religion, education, and far distance travel. Now, the thing that I need to kind of like let you guys know is you need to know if you are a day chart or a night chart. And I have a few videos of this. If you go over to my channel and you look at like my informative videos on playlist, there's a few videos where I talk about the difference between a day chart and a night chart. But all you need to know is look at your birth chart. Where is the sun? Is it below the horizon or is it above the horizon? And if it is above the horizon and you were born in the day, that means Mars is a little bit more problematic for you. Mars is a malefic planet and Saturn is a malefic planet. However, if you're born in the day, Mars is a little bit more problematic and Saturn is a little bit more beneficial, versus if you're born at night, Mars is a lot more beneficial and Saturn is a lot more negative, or a lot more difficult to work with. So the reason I bring that up is if you are a day chart, there might be more fights or conflicts or frustration regarding spirituality, religion, education, or far distance travel. This might just be frustration. I like to think of Mars in the 9th house as like shaking your fist at God, just being like a little bit upset, feeling a little burnt out. But if you're a night chart, there's a lot of fun energy going on here where there's a lot of focus on, the spiritual, learning, growing, traveling, all of that kind of good stuff. And then by the time we get to the end of the month on the 20th is when, again, we have Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. Now, we've already had this once starting March of 2023 until I think it was like May or June of 2023. Pluto moved into your 10th house of career and reputation and legacy. Now, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what all of this means just in this short video. I know this is going to be like an hour long, but Pluto in Aquarius is like a 20-year transit. And the easiest way to look at it is like over the next 2 decades, there's going to be a lot of transformation, power, fear, corruption, empowerment related to your career. And I would really think about what was going on between March, April, May, June of 2023 and what was changing around career for you guys, because you're going to see a little bit more of that happen this time around. Now, I would argue that there's way more energy happening this year with Pluto in Aquarius, and let me explain why. That actually brings us to February, because on February, we have a ton of Aquarius transits. Number one, we have Mars conjoining Pluto on February 13th. This is, again, all in your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. And so I want to show you something. When we get to February, where are we at here? When we get to February, let me get back to Taurus rising. And actually, let me turn this off too. When Mars ingresses into Aquarius, Mars again rules fights, conflicts, ambition, and energy and drive. Now, again, if you're a night chart, there's a lot of energy happening up here that's more like motivating and exciting. But if you're a day chart, there's a lot more fights and conflicts. Mars rules your 12th house of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies, the subconscious, fears and phobias. But it also rules your 7th house of relationships. So there might be some energy going on with other people and working behind the scenes and people that may not be in your favor going on in 10th house of career. Now, Mars conjoining Pluto and Aquarius is really kind of like a surge, like a power surge. And Aquarius rules society and people and technology, and Pluto being there is, again, we have like a whole 20-year transit of like a big change in society. But Mars conjoining Pluto is like an empowerment with that. Like I think of like a revolt or a revolution. I also think of like a needing to separate or a needing to isolate and stray away from the path. And that's happening on February 13th, where there's this extreme, like, aggressive energy happening with career. This might be like all of a sudden you're working, and working is like, your job just goes through the roof. It's super, super busy. And, over the past few years, you guys have taken more responsibility within your work and your career, and this might add more to your plate. But this is a little bit more complicated because while Mars conjoins Pluto, and we do have our problems, right? We're going to have Venus conjoin Pluto like 4 days later on the 17th. And again, all 10th house, so career, reputation, and legacy. The thing to understand about the 10th house, let me break it down for you guys actually with the chart. The second house is like your money, your finances, your resources. The 6th house is your labor, your routines, your work. And the 10th house is like your title. Like, for example, let's say an easy analogy would be like if you're a cop, that is a 10th house label. That is a title that you wear. Like, I am a police officer. But the 6th house is the work that goes into it that most people don't see. For example, the ascendant is here in Taurus. That means the descendant is here in the 7th house. That means the 6th house is underneath the surface of the earth. It's below the horizon. So it's hidden. And so if you're like a police officer, no one sees the reports that you have to write, or, sitting in your car, not doing shit all day long. That's like 6th house stuff. And so the air signs rule the working houses for you guys. And the reason I'm bringing this up is this isn't about like schedule or routines or like the labor that goes into your work. It's like the job itself, the title itself. There's something going on there on a bigger picture. And this might have to relate to your boss as well. But when we get to the 17th, this is when we're going to be having Venus conjoin Pluto. And so what's weird is like Mars conjoining Pluto is like this revolt, this revolution, this like, needing to be empowered by people or your community, especially related to your career. And this might involve fights and conflicts. But then Venus comes in and joins the gang. Venus is your ascendant ruler. So typically you can just watch Venus's transits, and she's going to be much more important for you than any other planet because you are ruled by Venus. But Venus also rules your 6th house of work and labor and routine and day-to-day activities. And so there's just a lot of work energy going on here where it's doing something different. It's connecting more with people. It's, again, Venus is about fun and pleasure and connection. And, one of my issues is the South Node is going through your 6th house now. So the 6th house also rules ill health. It rules pets. It rules, routines. And there's something like really draining and exhausting here happening. And the fact that Venus, your 6th ruler, hits like Pluto in the 10th house just feels like maybe there's some like corruption going on that doesn't make your job as fun anymore. And maybe you don't really want to connect with all of your coworkers, or maybe you're not really having as much connect with like the consensus, and you're having more of a connect with like an underground movement of like, hey, I don't really relate to these people anymore. I relate to these people. So there's some sort of like weird shift happening with your career right when we start the year off. And then right after that, like 5 days later, we have Venus conjoining Mars. Again, this is all in your 10th house, reputation, legacy, all that good stuff. And Mars-Venus conjunctions are like what we're doing. If Mars is fights, conflicts, energy, action, drive, ambition, and Venus is fun, love, romance, pleasure, and they're connecting, there's something like chaotically fun. Like it's almost like drama. Like, drama's all, fighting, but like, oh, it's spicy. Oh, it's fun. Oh, it's stimulating. And so that's going on here on the 22nd. And so the easiest way to look at this is just like, again, for one, a lot of action, a lot of drama, maybe something that's a little bit more fun. But something else that I'm looking at is it's your 1st ruler of you and your 7th ruler of relationships conjoining in the 10th. This might be working with a specific individual, a specific coworker, or some sort of a relationship forming in the work. That might be a client, that might be a romantic relationship. But the other way I look at it is it's your 6th house ruler of coworkers and ill health, and 12th house of isolation and hidden enemies and fears and phobias and the subconscious and self-sabotage conjoining each other. So this seems to be like there's someone that's definitely really important in the workplace right now, and the relationship's really complicated. Like, maybe you start seeing a coworker and maybe you probably shouldn't. Maybe, you have to work with someone that you really don't like working with. Maybe it's a little bit fun though, and there is some reconnection there. And that's just what I'm looking at here in the chart. I can't exactly relate this to your specific situation. So again, let me know in the comments as we go out through the year, what ends up happening for you guys here. So then we get to the end of the month, and this is when we get the Mercury, Saturn, Cazimi. This is happening in your 11th house of friends, networks, and community. This is on the 27th and on the 28th. So the thing with this is a Cazimi is when a planet conjoins the sun or the sun conjoins a planet. This is pretty much like when a planet, this is related to synodic cycles. It's like when a planet's, it's almost like a planet's birthday. It's like that planet's story for that time period resets. Now we get multiple Mercury Cazimis a year. It's like we get, when Mercury is retrograde and it conjoins the sun, that's a Cazimi. And when Mercury is direct on the other side of the sun, that's a Cazimi. So we get like what? 6 to 8 Cazimis a year with Mercury. And then Saturn, we get 1 Cazimi a year. And they're both happening essentially on the same day. And so let me show you guys. The thing is with this is why this is a highlight to me is like, this is so funky. For one, Mercury Cazimi is typically like a clarity moment. Like you're receiving some sort of information. There's a start of a new idea. There's some clarity going on. But Mercury is in detriment in Pisces. Like Mercury doesn't work all that well. So there's some sort of line of communication that happens, like some sort of info that is brought to you, but it's really not all that clear like what the situation is. And Mercury rules your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, and children. And it's going to go Cazimi in your 11th house of friends, networks, and communities. So this is maybe like reconnecting with friends, going out with friends, maybe new people that you haven't met before. But Mercury also rules your 2nd house of money and resources. So this is kind of like, my only issue with this is that there's something to do with like money and resources related to friends happening here. And, as an astrologer, it's kind of difficult to always be like, oh yeah, like you're going to spend money on friends, but that might just look different for everybody. So, put that context into your own life. But there is some sort of restart with friends related to both money and partying and fun. And then we have the Saturn Cazimi on the next day. Now, Saturn rules your 9th house again of, higher education, publishing, broadcasting, far distance travels, social media, religion, spirituality. And that planet is being reset in your 11th house of friends and community and networks. Now, I did a whole Saturn and Pisces video. If you haven't watched that already, make sure you check it out to know what Saturn and Pisces is about. But Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023. From March until June of 2023, Saturn moved into your 11th house where there was this, more responsibility with friends, more restrictions with friends, having less friends or having older friends. And then about June, and from March to June, as Saturn moved into Pisces and was direct, this was like being introduced to new, things that you have to take care of and new responsibilities and a new way of working with communities and friends. From June to November of 2023 was when Saturn went retrograde. So there was this kind of like learning curve. Like the way I always like to analogize it is, Saturn being direct and moving into new territory is like you start a new job and you're getting on the job training. Someone is there with you being like, here's your responsibilities. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. And then Saturn going retrograde is like your first couple days on your own. You're still learning the ropes. You're still trying to figure out what's going to work for you. You're still trying to figure out how to manage these responsibilities. And from June to November was that time period of like, okay, now I'm on my own. Now I have to figure out what is going on with my friends. What is going on with my community? Where do I need to be more restrictive? Where do I need to be more responsible? Where do I need to be more like, just mature with friends, especially related to career and reputation, as well as 9th house, spirituality, religion, social media, that sort of stuff. And then from November of 2023 until about this time, Saturn was going through shadow. So you were like, there's that learning period. And then about November was when you went like, okay, I know what I'm doing. It's like your, month 2 or month 3 at your new job where you're like, all right, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing here. I know what I'm doing here. But now Saturn is moving into new territory where we go into this whole thing again. You are now going to be learning more about what your new responsibilities are, your new limitations, your new restrictions with friends and community from here until June. And so this is when this story kind of gets reset. And so again, there's a lot of focus on friends at this point. So let's go ahead and go to March. The easiest way I've been able to explain this year is like January is very hustle, grind, doing a lot of work. February is kind of a lot of the same. And then March is when things get weird. However, I need a water break for just 1 second. Thank you. So we get to March. The first big transit that we get is this Mars-Uranus square. So, I don't know what else to say besides, like, there's a little bit of chaos happening at the beginning of March. You know, Mars is in your 10th house of career, and Uranus is in your first house of the self and body. So Uranus is all about innovation, liberation, freedom, innovation. Instability is an easy word to use for Uranus. And Uranus has been in your first house for like, what, 5 years at this point? So maybe there's been an innovative new ways that you've seen yourself, your identity. Maybe you've changed your, the way that your body looks by using new technology. Maybe you have gone through a new wardrobe, whatever that is. Just think about all the changes to like your image and your body and your worldview since 2018. That's pretty much what Uranus is. But we get this Mars-Uranus square. This is really disruptive. Like, again, fights, conflicts, energy, action, going AWOL in your career. Like Uranus, the other thing with Uranus in your first house is that you guys are just like the Taurus rising people are typically really stable, really chill. But Uranus, there's like, you're just itching to do something wild. You're just itching to go out of your way and, do this or do that, like quit your job and move to a different country, that sort of a thing. And so Mars being your 7th house ruler of relationships, squaring Uranus is like, this might be a big instability in relationships, especially related to clientele or just people that you work with. And you're just kind of, again, being a little bit chaotic about it. It might create a lot of instability in your own personality and your own worldview. Like there might be just so much chaos and, stuff going on with work that you feel very unstable. But it's also your 12th ruler of hidden enemies and self-sabotage in your 10th house of career squaring Uranus, where it just seems like, really check in with yourself around this time of like, okay, am I feeling too pressured? Am I feeling too overwhelmed? Because this is definitely a snapping moment. So be aware for that. Then we get Venus going into Pisces. This is awesome. We like Venus in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces. She does really well here. And it is about friends and networks and community. So the big thing here is like, again, if you are a night chart and you have been dealing with more restrictions and limitations with friends over this past year, this is where it's like, okay, maybe you don't have as many friends, but around when Venus goes into Pisces, you can enjoy them more. You can have more fun with them. Maybe you're connecting more with coworkers. Maybe you're, reconnecting with old friends. Now, if you're a day chart, I think this is excellent. Now that you've made some new friends, you've got more of a tighter, small niche of friends. Venus in your 11th house, again, Venus is your ruler. Like you're just going to be having more fun with friends. There's a lot more connection happening with friends once we get to March 11th. Then we get to the 18th, and this is when Mercury enters shadow. Now, from this point all the way through April is a lot of chaotic stuff. Like April is just a wild, wild month, and it really kicks off here, or at least the beginnings of it happen here. So Mercury enters shadow in your 12th house of isolation, subconscious, hidden enemies, self-sabotage. We'll talk all about this as we move on, but we will get Mercury into shadow. If Mercury is your 2nd house ruler of money and your 5th house ruler of love, romance, sex, pleasure, and it's in your 12th house and it's going to go retrograde, there's this kind of like, maybe fear around money or self-sabotage around money, but there's also this big rethink of like, what do you even want? Like, do you want the things that you want? Are you, doing any self-sabotage that like ensures that you're not getting what it is that you want? Really check in with that. And then as we enter the end of March, we get to eclipse season. Eclipse season happens every 6 months, and it is the wildest 2 weeks of every 6 months. It's kind of like opens dramatic doors, closes doors in a dramatic way. And this lunar eclipse is happening in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines, coworkers, employees, that sort of thing. And so let's actually pull up the chart for this one. So the big thing here is what I'm kind of noticing is that there's all this stuff happening with, work and career up into this moment. And then we have an eclipse on the south node. So there is this kind of like, the south node is in your 6th house. Your work, your labor, your health routines, everything about this area is like really draining and exhausting. And, like you're just not having as much fun with it. And now that everything's out of your 10th house except Pluto, we get this eclipse in your 6th house where it's just kind of like what needs to be released, what needs to be let go of. Now, a lunar eclipse is a full moon is supposed to illuminate things that you don't always get to see all the time. And this being an eclipse, it's like you're supposed to be seeing something here, but then something majorly shifts. This is typically like an eclipse is, again, a major ending or a beginning. And as everything's going on in your 12th house now of isolation, alienation, a lot of this does look like health stuff. I really, really want you guys to be on top of your health, because this year could look bad if you like are not on top of the health stuff. If you're on top of the health stuff, then you should be fine for the most part. But like if you're, dramatically going downhill, you're going to have some issues this year. So we have this eclipse that marks off eclipse season. And so let's go ahead and go into April. And like I said before, April's just a wild, wild month. Like you kind of just have to sit back and let things happen, let things play out. Number one, on April Fool's Day, which is funny for this, because Mercury rules like the trickster. Mercury stations retrograde. We get our first retrograde of 2024. And again, this is in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, hidden enemies, fears, phobias, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself. We get all types of 12th house transits. So like I said, with Mercury retrogrades are about like rethinking and reviewing and delays and, just overall seeing things differently, slowing down. Miscommunications is a big part of it. Sorry, I'm kicking my feet up here for a second. Let me do this. And so when we pull up the chart, we get to the 25th. My bad, the 1st, and Mercury is going to go retrograde. So there's kind of this big slowdown. There's this, what I see with Mercury retrogrades in the 12th house is like a mental reevaluation. Like, let's check in. How are we doing here? Number one, Mercury rules your second house of money, and it's retrograding the 12th, where it's like, don't bet everything on some sports game like a degenerate. It's also your 5th ruler again, too. So love, romance, sex, pleasure. Retrograding in your 7th, in your 12th, there's kind of this like, fear about what you want or confusion about what you want. And again, Mercury in Aries is like really kind of like just vocal and very raw and like will tell it to you bluntly. And so with Mercury going retrograde, there might be this just kind of like in your head of like, rethinking how you get in your own way with what it is that you want or pleasures or even money. And it looks a little stressful, to be honest with you guys. Like Taurus risings are typically, again, really chill. Aries, the sign of like fighting and combat, rules your 12th house of like repressed parts of yourself. So like, I think this is going to be a time to really get in tune with like your inner warrior. Because you're probably just not going to have a choice but to. And then we get to our solar eclipse in Aries. Now, we haven't had a solar eclipse in Aries yet, even though by this point the North Node has been in Aries for quite some time. Again, this is all in the same area. Solar eclipses are like major endings and beginnings. I think solar eclipses are almost bigger deal than lunar eclipses, but there's a big shift happening in your 12th house. The 12th house does rule hospitals and asylums, and again, it also rules, hidden enemies, pitfalls, things like that. So there's something like really shifting in like your subconscious here, because that's also the 12th house. And so I would really think about that. But what makes this solar eclipse so important is that it's ruled by Mars. It's in the sign of Aries, and Mars conjoins Saturn 2 days after. And this is in your 11th house of friends, networks, and community. So I would really pay attention to this, because again, this is like in the middle of eclipse season. And we get this eclipse in your 12th house again of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies. And then the ruler of your 12th house of hidden enemies is in your 11th house of friends, and it's conjoining Saturn, your 10th ruler of career, your 9th ruler of, spirituality, belief, social media. And there just seems like both of the malefic planets, so these are both the bad planets, are conjoining together in your 11th house. So part of me feels like maybe there's a falling out with friendships. Maybe there's a falling out. Maybe there's some fights or conflicts, or maybe you're limited with your connections to friends, and that like maybe bothers you on like a mental level. There's some major, like this is where all the issues are, which again, 11th house of friends, 12th house of like hidden enemies, isolation, self-sabotage, that sort of thing. So really pay attention here. But what's really funny is right after that, we get the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is just arguably the best transit of the year. And it's in your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. 2 issues. Well, let me talk about the goods real quick, so I'm not just like harping on the negatives. The good thing is like this is Jupiter, which is all about abundance and fortune and faith and, excitement and expansion. And it's conjoining Uranus, the planet of innovation and liberation and freedom. But Jupiter rules your 11th house of friends. and it's in your first house of yourself. So since like May of 2023, Jupiter's been in your first house. So there's probably been a lot more of you being connected with a wider audience, with a lot more people. But Jupiter also rules your 8th house of other people's resources. Maybe other people have been giving you a lot of things like, here, just take this. I don't need this anymore. And that could easily be a good thing. But the 8th house also rules death, other people's money, shared resources, debt, inheritance, taxes. And one of my cautions is Jupiter rules your 8th house of death. It's in your first house of your body. It's conjoining Uranus. Like a good example, like I shouldn't say a good example, something not to do would be like going to an electrical power plant and being like, what happens if I touch this wire? You might get, 100,000 volts to your body and fucking die. I really want to know what happens to you guys here, because I think I said this at the beginning of this video. This is very like, on one end, it's like, okay, be careful to not like, do something stupid where you fuck yourself up. But there's another part of this that's just like, wow, really seeing things clearly, like really waking up out of a fog, really just kind of like seeing the truth to something. There's something very shocking and liberating happening with like the way that you see your world. Same thing with your body and your image around this time. This is some sort of deep, again, like Uranus is, again, innovation, liberation, upheaval. It rules your 11th house of friends, and it's, in your first house where maybe you get rid of some friends. Maybe you make some new friends all of a sudden after your drama with the other friends, or again, maybe there's someone that gives you some shared resource, or you get some weird inheritance that you weren't expecting. That's what I'm really looking at here. And it looks really exciting, but I think also just a lot. Like, no matter if it's good or bad, it's overwhelming, I think, at the end of the day. So then we get to the end of the month. Mars goes into Aries. For most people, I like this. For you guys, this is a lot about kind of just like hiding away. Because again, it's 12th house, isolation, subconscious, hidden enemies. Mars will be in its home sign. It will do well. But I think just Mars in your 12th house is like, let's calm down on the self-sabotage stuff. Let's calm down a little bit on needing to hide away, needing to isolate. This would be a better time to focus on like working on yourself and like really looking at like, how do you get in your own way? What is your subconscious trying to tell you? Because like the more you push back on it now, like there's going to be like more issues, but the more that you really work on it and bring light, like breathe life into it, the better it's going to be. So then we get to May. May is arguably the best month of the year. I think you guys just need a little bit of like, again, just Mars in your 12th house, like stirring up shit in the back of your mind. But May looks awesome for a few reasons. Before I go into these exact transits, I want to show you why. Number one, by the time we get to May, we're going to have that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but Jupiter will still be there. Now, when you look at what's going on here on May 1st, we have Venus, your ruling planet, in her home sign, Taurus, in your first house of home and body, of your body and yourself and your image. We have the sun here. We have Uranus here. We have Jupiter here. We have both benefics. All benefic planets are transiting your first house all through May. So I think there's a part of this, time in May where you're feeling really good. Like you're at least looking good. You're like, again, on your sexy shit, feeling hot. Yes, Mars is in your 12th house at this point. So there is something about like, relationships are a little bit more private and a little bit more tucked away. And maybe it's a little bit more problematic, but there is a lot more just energy and drive more towards like, conflicts with yourself essentially. So while all that it's happening, we get Mercury leaving shadow by the 13th. So we're done with this whole like review and reflection about your subconscious and hidden enemies and isolation and things like that. But then we get to the 19th, and this is when Mars conjoins the North Node. Again, this is all in your 12th house. This would be like, the inner demon in you is just going to want to touch the big red button. Really have some self-awareness about this. I think it's just going to be easy to act out. I think it's going to be easy to really beat yourself up. Problems in relationships, a lot of fights and conflicts in relationships, bringing up things you don't want to talk about in relationships. And it's going to want to turn that up to like 11, where it's like, rather than having a peaceful civil conversation, it like explodes. The biggest thing is like Mars is fights and conflicts and, energy and ambition. It's going to be conjoining the North Node. The North Node just turns everything up to an extreme where it's like, oh, no, you have to pursue this. No, you have to go here and take it all the way. I would really just work on like that will be there and you should honor that energy, but know that you don't have to always take it all the way. You don't have to act so impulsively. And so I just feel like there might be a lot of internal frustration and conflict, even though on the outside, you're looking good, you're feeling good, you're doing shit. And I think a more positive way of looking at the 12th house is like, if you're, there's a lot of like inner work going on here. Like you're really kind of like, again, fighting those demons in the back of your head during this time. It's up to you of whether or not you win or they win. Then by the end of the month, we get Jupiter ingressing into Gemini on the 25th. This is entering your second house of money and possessions and resources. So again, we like that, but this comes with a caveat. The caveat being Jupiter is going to enter a detriment. So Jupiter does not do all of that well in Gemini. The reason being is Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury and Jupiter are opposites. So when you get Mercury in a Jupiter ruled sign, it doesn't work well. And when you get Jupiter in a Mercury ruled sign, it also doesn't do well. But on the surface, it's like, hey, Jupiter's in your second house of money. Jupiter increases, Jupiter expands, Jupiter brings opportunities. And so that should be really good for money. However, if you've been watching me for at least over a year, I've talked a lot about over this year, like Jupiter transits don't always mean good things. 80% of the time it does, especially for day chart people. If you're a day chart, sick, fuck yeah. But it's not always that way. Like at the very minimum, if it's not like a good thing, Jupiter is like, hey, what are your beliefs about this area? What is your faith in this area? And that might be, caused by an issue, right? Like it's kind of like you might be looking at this area more in a spiritual sense because of a problem with this area. And Jupiter, again, rules your 11th house of friends and community and networking. And that might have to do with career stuff because your 10th house ruler of careers there. And it's in detriment in your second house of money where it's like, I don't know, maybe you're like poor and all your friends are rich. Or maybe you're rich and all your friends are poor. And so there's this kind of like, like when you have like friends that can like pay for all the trips and you're like, I don't got that kind of money. But it's also your 8th ruler of other people's resources, your partner's resources. Like if you are in a relationship, the first house is you and the second house is your money. Well, your partner is your 7th house and their money is the 8th house and their money is in detriment in your second house. So this might be like you're making more money, but like maybe your partner loses their job or you are the sole breadwinner at this point or you are paying more for their stuff. That's kind of the thing that's going on here. So there is definitely an increase in money. There's definitely some sort of like weird new thing going on with money that looks really, really good. But throughout the year, when I say cause problems, like it's so hard as an astrologer to like say something like that. And people are like, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything. And it's not how it is. It's just like, okay, like, more money, more problems essentially is what's happening here. And that kind of continues through June. So we get Jupiter into Gemini. We really like that, even though it's in detriment. So it's kind of like maybe you're making more money, but there is this kind of like, maybe you're paying more for other people. Maybe you're making more money and you're in debt. And so a lot of that money has to go to your debt. Pay it off. That's a good thing. But that's kind of what Jupiter and Gemini is, like proposing here. Like it's more money, more wealth, but with stipulations. You can think about 2012, like summer of 2012. That was the last time we had a Jupiter go to Gemini. But then right after that, we have a Venus Cazimi in Gemini. So Venus Cazimis are like, again, Venus is about pleasure, fun, connection. And she gets a Cazimi, so that's a restart in her whole synodic cycle. And that happens in your second house of money and possessions on the 4th. We like this. Think about June of 2016. Every 8 years, Venus goes retrograde in the same zodiac sign, but every 8 years as well, Venus has a Cazimi in the exact same sign. So the last time we had this Venus Cazimi in Gemini was June of 2016. And the last time we had Jupiter in Gemini was like June of 2012. So think about those two times and try to bring them together. Venus, again, rules your ascendant of your body, yourself, your image, and your 6th house of work, health, and routines. And it's going Cazimi in the 2nd house where this like, again, almost like maybe a new job, maybe, there's a pay increase, maybe you get a promotion here. Mercury is in your 2nd house, conjoining Jupiter. Like, I'll put it to you this way. While throughout this year, money will be complicated, this is awesome. Like, we like this. This might be a new start with money. Maybe you start being like, I need to budget my money and get out of my debt, or I want to buy a house or whatever it is. But there's a lot of fun stimulation here. Only issue is you're going to be spending more. Like when you make more, you spend more. That's what's going on here. So be aware of that. But there does just seem to be a new start with money happening here. More money, more understanding and organized money. Again, it's your sixth ruler of work and your first ruler of your body. So again, maybe being an entrepreneur or doing something yourself or starting some sort of new job. That's how I would look at it. And so then we get to on the 8th, we have Mars ingressing into Taurus. So Mars rules, again, fights and conflicts, and it doesn't do well in Taurus. There's kind of this frustration, this slowdown, and it's going into your first house of your body, yourself, your image, your identity. You're going to start getting fucking crabby by June. Like, you're irritated, you're not moving as fast, and there will be problems in relationships because Mars rules your 7th house of relationships, and it's in detriment in your first house of the body. So, you're being a little bit more aggravated. You're not really, your partner's pissing you off a little bit more, that sort of a thing. And that lasts for a little while. Then we get the Mercury Cazimi. This is, again, a new clarity, new insight, new understanding of what's going on with your money. A lot of cool money stuff. Saturn stations retrograde on the 30th. So this is the very end of the month. And this is like I said before, if Saturn was moving direct, it's like, okay, here's all of your new responsibilities and duties. Here's all this new friendship stuff. We had a lot of stuff going on with friends for you in April. Saturn going retrograde is like, okay, now it's time to like navigate this on your own. Figure out what needs to be, like where your responsibilities are and how you can navigate it through yourself. Again, Saturn does rule your 10th house of career and it's in your 11th house of friends. So that might be a part of it. Like it might be a work thing, but also just kind of like, hey, moving backwards a little bit away from friends, being a little bit more, having better boundaries with friends is another way to look at it too. So we get to July. Big thing that we have going on here is Mars conjoins Uranus. The last time we had a Mars-Uranus conjunction was August 1st of 2022. Think about what was going on that time and if you got in an accident, if you accidentally cut yourself, if you got injured or got sick or you had a major breakup or something like that. Very similar here. Mars rules, again, your 7th house of relationships and your 12th house of like hidden enemies, hospitals, and it's conjoining and it's in detriment in your first house of your body, your image, and it's conjoining Uranus, the planet of upheavals. You can think about what was going on 420 and whatever was going on with 420. This is kind of a similar energy, but instead of like liberation and freedom and fun, this is kind of like much more problematic. Let me just show you real quick. And so I would think about August of 2022. That was the last time that we got this. But this is like, again, some sort of upheaval, some sort of distress, some sort of like, again, it's like, for example, if you've been laying on a bed for a week, not moving your body, let's say even a month. Let's say you've been sitting on bed for a month. You haven't moved your body. You haven't even got up. Like you've been going to the bathroom on the bed, like in a cup or whatever. If you just jumped out of bed and you went to run, you would shatter your legs. That's like this Mars-Uranus thing. It's like like if you are not moving, there's going to be an issue and something's going to break. And that's very 7th house ruler conjoining Uranus in the first, like a big breakup, a big fight, or again, maybe an issue with the body. Mercury goes into shadow. Mercury is going to retrograde in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, and children, and in your 4th house of the home and living situation and parents. So there will be a retrograde here. Mercury enters shadow in your 4th house, again, of living situation. So there might be some more money and kid stuff focused on home and family. So just pay attention to that. And then we get Mars going into Gemini. This is when the tax man comes and you're like, oh, I was enjoying all this money, but now I'm spending a lot more. So Mars, again, fights conflicts. It's in your 2nd house of Gemini. This is Mars burns things and it's going through your 2nd house of cash. Like, while you were making money, you should save some because during this time, you're going to start spending a lot more. And so then we get to August. The next 2 months are kind of boring, to be honest with you. A lot of the highlights happen at the beginning of the year. Gosh, excuse me. But we get this Mercury retrograde, like I said, on August 5th. So Mercury, your 2nd house ruler of money and your 5th house ruler of love, romance, sex, children, creativity, and hobbies retrogrades in your 5th house. So again, this might have to be money related to kids, related to like love, romance, sex, just kind of like delays, rethinking this area. Reorganizing is a good way to look at it. That starts on the 5th. And then we get the Mars-Jupiter conjunction on August 14th. That is kind of like a major blow to money. So, and this is really interesting. I want you to pay attention to this because Mars conjoins Jupiter, where it's like, think about what was going on between September of 2022 to about March of 2023. We had a whole Mars retrograde in Gemini. And while this isn't a retrograde, that was like 7 or 8 months of Mars in Gemini. What was going on with money? Were you spending this, spending that, like redoing money? This will be a very similar energy, but Mars conjoining Jupiter is like a blow up with money. Like, again, like getting a little bit more in debt, maybe having an argument with friends or something like that related to money. But this is what's interesting is, look, Mars conjoins Jupiter at about 16 degrees. But look at the next highlight that we have. We have the Jupiter-Saturn square 5 days later. Like I said before, this is much more of a bigger picture transit, but I think this Mars-Jupiter conjunction tees this up because Jupiter's in your second house of money and possessions, but Saturn's in your 11th house of friends and networks and community as your 10th ruler of career. So it's kind of like, okay, something blows up here, maybe with friends, because Jupiter does rule your 11th house of friends and and Mars rules your 7th house of like relationships. Maybe something blows up about money. And then it's not a few days later when Jupiter squares Saturn. And this is what I was talking about, where this comes with caveats. Saturn rules your 9th house of social media, spirituality, religion, 10th house of career. It's in your 11th house of friends. And then Jupiter squares it. So there's this kind of like, and again, it's squaring your 11th, Jupiter rules your 11th house of friends. So there's this kind of like, if I'm making this money, but I have to be involved with these people, is it worth it? If I am like, that's kind of the thing here where, Jupiter's not doing all too well at this point. And a lot of this has to do with Saturn in the 11th house of like having boundaries with people, being more restrictive with people, being more with mature people when it comes to your friends and how you connect with people. And so there just seems to be some tension around your career, your boss, your workplace, and the communities and networks associated with that, and money. There's some tension issue that happens in August. And so this is a bigger long-term transit. We will revisit this in December. So just pay attention to this August transit. We get to September. September is pretty boring. Pluto moves back into Capricorn. This is kind of like, I feel like at this point, it's like going back to your hometown. Pluto's been Aquarius for quite some time now. Pluto will dip back into Capricorn for a little bit, back in your 9th house. I really wouldn't stress all that much about this because we've had Pluto in Capricorn for like, 12, 15 years or something like that since 2008. So actually 10, 15, 16. Yes, about 16 years. Venus conjoins the South Node. This is on the 3rd. This is in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines. Venus will be in Libra at this time, so she'll be doing better. There will be a bigger focus on work, health, pets, routines, but it's Venus conjoining the South Node. This is like, I don't want this anymore. Like maybe this is about work, or maybe about, working with coworkers, or maybe about your health status or your routines. Like there's something that's like, this is nice. Like it's not bad, but I don't enjoy it anymore and I don't have pleasure from it. So I need to change it. And then Mars goes into Cancer, where Mars again fights in conflicts, and Mars doesn't do well in Cancer. Cancer, if Mars is about war, Cancer is about like babies and nurturing and taking care of yourself. And it's just feeling crabby, but it's going into a weird part of your chart. Mars rules your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, short distance travel. Another way to look at it is it's like how you utilize the knowledge that you have. It's also related to communication. And so we're going to, and let me just pull up the chart anyway. This happens right at the beginning of September. So the big thing here is Mars rules your 7th house of relationships. And that could be like your partner, like your spouse, but also your, like any major individual in your life. It also rules your 12th house, again, of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies. And it's in your 3rd house of like neighbors and siblings. So there seems to be kind of like some crabby, emotional, heavy stuff happening with like your neighbors, your siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, possibly even, what was I looking for? Your local neighbors, like your community and stuff like that. Pay attention to this because this gets important as we go along. We get to October, and by October, we have our solar eclipse in Libra. Think about what was going on around October 13th, 14th for you, because of 2023, because this was the last time we had a solar eclipse in Libra. And what shifted with your work or your health or even pets or your teens or your coworkers? We get another one of these happening here at this point. This is the beginning of eclipse season 2, and it's a solar eclipse. It's a major, cutting off. It's a major door opening or a major door closing happening again with work, routine, health habits, and things like that. This is why I was saying, like, I want you guys to be focusing on health stuff this year, because there's just so many weird areas where that can come up and probably not be good. But then we get to the 4th. This is when Mars enters shadow. This is the big thing about this year, is this Mars retrograde, where there's going to be an event that happens with siblings, neighbors, or short distance travel. So this could be related to your car. You might even have car issues during this time, where your needs are not being met, and there's some crabbiness and there's some emotional, and it's like immature fighting is another way to look at it. It's also very defensive. Like Mars in Gemini is, Mars in Cancer is very defensive. It's not on the offense, it's on the defense. And so here on the 4th, Mars enters shadow. Mars will continue to go through Cancer, dip into Leo, station retrograde, come backwards back into Cancer. So there's something about this time that's going to come up with, again, siblings, neighbors, community, aunts, uncles, cousins, short distance travel, possibly related to cars, communication, technology. The 3rd house is like the junk drawer of the chart. It's got so much going on with it. So you'll have to, again, put context into what it's going to be like for you. But something happens here that you're going to come back to in February of 2025. I think it's either February or March. It's March of 2025 that you'll come back to that will be very relevant. So pay attention to what's happening here in that area of your life. Then we get Jupiter stationing retrograde. Jupiter is direct for 10 months at this point. Long time to be direct. Not a bad thing whatsoever. I am not complaining. But it goes retrograde in your 2nd house of money and possessions. This is kind of like when the good luck ends. And it's not that again, you're not going to lose everything. It's not dire, you're going to be just fine. But there's this level of being like, okay, this is what I have. What are my beliefs? Like Jupiter going through your 2nd house is it will be very clear about what your beliefs about money are, because they will be it will be immediately happening. But then Jupiter retrograde is reflecting on it. Jupiter retrograde is the learning experience. Jupiter going direct is doing the school work, versus Jupiter retrograde is doing the field work. Everything can make sense in a classroom, but then the second you get the real world experience, you have to kind of throw out that learning curve. And that's Jupiter going through your 2nd house at this point, where there's this kind of okay, maybe I need to, what do I need to learn about finances? Maybe you made more money, but you spent it. Maybe you're at the same place. Do I need to learn how to budget? Do I need to know where to invest my money? That's sort of the deal that we're looking at here. And then after that, we get to the lunar eclipse in Aries. Like I said before, this is the end of eclipse season, and we can go back to April of this year. What kind of started and began in April, and this kind of brings all of that to a big highlight. So this almost isn't even an eclipse, but I'm going to count it as an eclipse anyway, because, fuck you, I do what I want. But this brings up all the stuff that started in April, all those big shifts in that 12th house area of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobia, stuff like that. So we get to November. By November, Mars goes into Leo, which is your 4th house of home and parents and living situation. So like I said, Mars will retrograde here. Mars is fights and conflicts. It's going into Leo, the side of pride and passion and saying shit with your chest and heart and entertainment and stuff like that. And so Mars going into your 4th house will be more fights, conflicts, problems with parents, essentially. And you'll want to pay attention to that because Mars is going to retrograde here. Mercury enters shadow. It will go into your 8th house of other people's money, death and debt, inheritance, taxes. So this is why I said pay attention to the Mercury retrograde or when Mercury stations direct at the beginning of 2024, because this will come back up in November. And this is the big thing here. Let me just kind of show you this. Mercury will, let me get back to Taurus rising here. So your 8th ruler, Jupiter, is in your 2nd house of money, and your 2nd house ruler of money, Mercury, is in your 8th house ruler of other people's money. So there's this kind of big look at I need to rebalance. I need to restructure my finances. Where do I need to pay money? Where do I need to get out of debt? What's up with this inheritance thing? That's all this time. And it's probably really confusing and overwhelming, to be honest with you. It doesn't look the most fun, but it looks important. Then by the 19th, Pluto goes back into Aquarius permanently. We're here. Between November of 24 and July of 2025, Pluto goes into Aquarius, Neptune goes into Aries, Uranus goes into Gemini, Saturn goes into Aries, and Jupiter enters Cancer. We have every single major big planet moving into a new zodiac sign, and this will start that process. By the time we get to the 15th, Saturn stations direct. So there is this again, like, all right, I know what my responsibilities are with related to career and the ninth house stuff with friends and networks and community. I know what I must do now. I feel more comfortable taking on the responsibility in this area. And then, of course, by the very end of the month, Mercury stations retrograde. So again, this is a whole slowdown, a revisit, a miscommunication, a restructuring of the whole financial stuff that you have going on here. Then we get to December, the very end of the month, and Mars stations retrograde. Part of me wonders if you guys move. I can't say with absolute certainty that that is what is happening, but I would be curious about what is going to happen. This is happening on what, the 6th? Is what? Yeah. Let me do this. So Mars goes retrograde, and like I said, Mars rules your 12th house of hidden. Like, part of me thinks, like, you know, there might be problems with neighbors or roommates. I'd be really careful about that. It's your 7th house ruler of relationships, retrograde in the 4th. There might be some situation about, you know, maybe your spouse or partner moves in with you. Maybe they move out. That might be a way of looking at it. Maybe this is just like you're fighting with your parents over something. That could be that. There just seems to be like I've been looking at Mars and Leo as like the cowardly lion. Like, it's like your tail's tucked between your legs here. Like, there's something about living situation stuff that's not all that fun right now. It's not sparking joy. So I'd pay attention to that. And that's what, I mean, we have most of this happening in 2025. Again, like I said, 2024 is the buildup to 2025. That's the easiest way to make sense of this year. Mercury stations direct by the 16th. So again, this kind of money stuff and debt stuff and other people's resources gets worked out at this point. And I think that's really the big highlight for you for like November and December is like, you need to get this money shit figured out right now. And then by the very end of the year, this is when we get the next Jupiter-Saturn square. It's still in the same places, 2nd house of money, 11th house of friends. But the thing I wanted to bring up with it is, you know, let me go ahead and get to the day. The thing I wanted to bring up with it is the last time that we had this, Jupiter was direct and Saturn was retrograde. So it was kind of like Jupiter was like, I want to move forward while Saturn is moving backwards. Saturn's moving forward now while Jupiter's moving backwards. So this is much more of like, okay, I really need to get a grip on this. What are my responsibilities? What are my duties? And realizing like what belief systems aren't working. Jupiter and Gemini is like trying to do two things at once, and you just can't have your cake and eat it too. That's the issue with Jupiter and Gemini. And this has to do with career. This has to do with money stuff. And I just think by the time we get to the 24th, coming back to what was going on in August of 2024, you kind of come back to this point and go like, all right, I see this area a little bit more maturely, and I have a better idea of what I need to handle. And that's this year, guys. That's 2024. Let me know in the comments below what you're excited for, what you're not excited for. If you have any big events, or if you know maybe what could happen for you given your life and what you're planning on some of these, you know, major transits. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, like it. It absolutely does help my channel. If you can't do anything else to support, if you want to keep up to date with month by month, of course, join the Patreon. And like I said, I have the transit calendar for your phone, for your calendar phone, or the calendar on your phone. If you want to know exactly when transits are going to be hitting your birth chart. And of course, you can always reach out to get a consultation with me for us to go over everything that's going on with your chart in a way, way more specific way. So let me know what's going on with you guys, and I will see you next time.